Do you ever go back and read comics, reread comics? And not infrequently. I mean, just do you have a go-to comic that you'll read five or six, seven, eight times over the course of 10 years? Like there's a comic that you just love. Today, I'm wanting to talk a little bit about rereading old comics. Why do you do it, and are there go-to ones you always do? Hey everybody, this is Perch, and that was a clumsy opening. I don't know. Sometimes my words get ahead of my mouth, so my brain is like off on the third or fourth paragraph, and my mouth is desperately trying to just keep up and keep going and failing in a lot of cases. But you know, so I have this thought a lot because I look at my bookshelf and I see lots of comics there, the hardcovers and trades, and of course I have my long boxes that are buried in a closet that have bags and bags and bags, slowly forcing myself out of my house. But there's a couple comics I will read, every now and then. I'll pick up and I'll go back and read again. And with digital being an option, I do get some of these comics in a digital format. And then when I'm on a plane or I'm traveling somewhere, I do go out on a walk, sit by a creek, read a comic. There's a couple I always go to, and for whatever reason, the Ultimates Volume 1 and 2 is one that I often go back and read again and again. I'm not sure why, but it's a common one. Why the Last Man is another one that I've read many times and over. I've read the original Crisis, the George Perez. I always go with him first because the illustration is so amazing. But that's one I read a lot. I don't, but unlike there are many people I talk to who they read The Watchmen or V for Vendetta, once a year, and that's not me. I've read Watchmen. I don't know, it has to be at least a dozen times, but it's not one I pick up and go back to over and over again. The original Dark Knight, though, I have. The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, another one that I go back to. I think there's a lot of these kind of seminal comics that you go back and you read a lot. And one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is how we aren't really making a lot of those anymore. Like in the last 5 years, are there any comics that have been made that really will have that feel to it? The most, and this isn't in the last 5 years, but the Rick Remender X-Force run is one that I've gone back and read many times. The Garth Ennis Punisher is another one. Both the Max and the original is another one that I've read many times. The Preacher book. I'm sure that for you, there's a lot of comics like that. But what's interesting is the events. Civil War, I've reread a few times. Secret Invasion, I've tried to, but I've noticed that one of the reasons why maybe I don't like Bendis as much as some of the other writers is that he has a structure to his events where there's like an opening salvo that really, starts things off with a bang, and then the second act is really, really slow. Secret Empire had the same problem. You got this middle kind of very, very slow act, and it takes the motivation of reading it again away. Fear Itself was I mean I've not read that many times at all. Yeah, I'm just yawning actually. Sorry, I hit Fear Itself and I'm like I just yawn. I don't know. it's instinctual at this point. But on the other hand, House of M, and that's a Bendis book. I've read that many times. I think that's a really solid one. The Dark Phoenix saga, etc. So what about for you? And I'm not jumping right into the comments, but what makes a comic one that not just you go back and you read every now and then? Like there will be people who say, I need to go back and read the John Byrne She-Hulk run. But I will defy people. It's a very beautiful run. The book was wonderfully illustrated. It was fun She-Hulk. It was breaking the fourth wall Deadpool before there was a Deadpool, which is cool. All that stuff is really great. But I don't think that that's a comic that I will just pick up and read and reread over and over again. It's a solid run of a comic, but it's not it's not reread material in a lot of cases. And here's an example for me, and I'm just curious. I'm mainly throwing these things out there. I'm curious to get some conversation going in the comments. I will read the Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Dark Phoenix saga many times. I have read it many times, and I'll pick it up and read it probably about once a year. I'll just go back and read that issue, that trade paperback that I've got. On the other hand, I have very, very fond feelings to John Byrne's Fantastic Four. The whole Malice storyline with Sue, some of the stuff they did with the Hate Monger and uh, Psycho Man, and there's just some really great storylines in the John Byrne Fantastic Four run. That said, I don't seek it out to read it over and over again. It feels like a really great run of comics. It's one I enjoy. It's one I put very, very top, but it's not one that is a go-to book that I pick up to read. I'm more likely to pick up like Why the Last Man. But what's interesting is Why the Last Man, I think, is a great story, some cool stuff going on, really solid comic. But I would definitely put John Byrne's Fantastic Four run on top of it in terms of quality and overall power of stories. I think John Byrne's run is, as a creator, is top notch. But in terms of rereading it as something to kind of entertain myself and go back to, I'm more likely to do Why the Last Man. Why is that? I think that there's a difference between making a self-contained kind of story where you can feel like you have a beginning, middle, and end, like Dark Knight Returns, like Civil War, honestly, like the Ultimates even. The Ultimates felt like a story, a self-contained story you could pick up, read, be done with, and have a good experience doing it, as opposed to, say, some great runs in the Avengers. And there have been some really great runs in the Avengers. The Kurt Busiek, George Perez run was really, really solid of the Avengers. I think some of what Bendis did, there are some runs of New Avengers and some of the work he was doing that I also really, really liked. But it's not like reading the Ultimates. The Ultimates feels like I'm getting a story, and it's one I can go back to. I often wonder, there's a couple people I know, customers, who they will buy the floppies, and then as soon as a trade paperback comes out of their favorite books, they pick it up. And I always wonder, are they reading that? They bought it. Are they actually going back to it? Are they reading this trade paperback over and over and over again? Or is it just kind of habit? Have you been wired to say, well, I buy the floppies and I buy the collections because this is my favorite character? If you go into a comic store, you'll see a lot of people who will tell you, my favorite character is Iron Man. So I buy everything with Iron Man in it. And the question of if they should buy it, or do I like these creators, or is this story interesting to me, is almost secondary. You see a lot with music too, and I like Guns N' Roses as a band, and I loved LA Guns, and I would get everything attached to them. So I remember when Chinese Democracy hit, and that album came out, I bought the at that point digital was a thing, but still I went in, I bought the CD, and I saw that there was a vinyl version of it sitting there, and so I bought the vinyl. And my wife's going, we don't have a record player. Why are you buying that? It's like, well, it's Guns N' Roses. I get all the Guns N' Roses stuff. She's like, but you don't have a record player. What are you doing, idiot? And I'm like, oh, she does not understand. But then the other day, I'm like looking at my shelf, and there's that Guns N' Roses, vinyl up there, never been opened. And it's like, why did I buy that? What is the purpose? As a collector's item? It's not a collector's item. It's just not. There's not going to be a point. Like, do I have this fantasy that one day I'm going to walk into a music store and be like, I've got a first generation Chinese Democracy vinyl album right here, never been opened. So like, holy crap, here's $1,000. Now you can send your kids to college. All kinds of that story are ridiculous. Anyway, but I got off track. What comics do you enjoy that you will read over and over and over again, even if you read it a bunch of times? And are they the comics you love? Are they the comics that you really like to read, or is there something about those stories that just gives you a good reread experience? I'm not even sure that's a word. Leave a comment below. Let me know some of your favorites to go back to. Would love to have a dialogue with all of you about that. And hey, while you're at it, like and subscribe, and introduce to friends. Get more people in here. That's the name of the game. There's some game, anyway, it's being played. Or if you just hate YouTube's commenting, that all sounds good. And, follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. Probably going to get more response on Twitter. Just, I don't know, by its nature. But most importantly, hey, thanks for listening and reading. Both those things.